Chapter 22. Direct comparison, comparative, and cost approaches of appraisal. Using the comparative approach of appraisal to value properties with redevelopment potential, it is not necessary that the comparables and the subject property have a market value of 0 in their current use. The Consumer Price Index is a good method to adjust sale prices to the level of values prevailing as of the date of appraisal, under no circumstances. Two identical houses in Amble Green, a neighborhood in Surrey, British Columbia, are most likely to have different appraised values because one property has an attractive mountain view and the other does not. In applying the cost approach to the valuation of a single-family residence built in 1954, the value of improvements is determined by the current costs of constructing a modern equivalent of the subject property. Which one of the following is true where a comparable property is sold subject to a vendor-supplied mortgage at an interest rate lower than the current market rate? The comparable sale price must be adjusted downward. Which one of the following is termed functional and curable depreciation in a building? Narrow hallways. The cost approach of appraisal is not generally used to value vacant lots. If the cost of developing houses is greater than their market value, what will occur in the short run? Development will stop. There are many reasons why a property might sell for a price that is different from its current appraised value. Which of the following could be a reason? The appraisal was done by the cost approach. Of the following methods, which one must be used to determine the market value of an unused vacant site? Comparative approach of appraisal. In using the cost approach, the major difficulty is experienced in calculating incurable physical depreciation. The comparative approach of appraisal is based on an analysis of recent sale prices for similar properties. Which of the following best defines the word recent? A period of time during which supply and demand conditions have not changed. In using the comparative approach of appraisal, the appraiser estimates the value from the evidence afforded by the sale price of similar properties that have recently been sold. Which of the following best describes what is meant by similar? Similar with respect to those factors that are likely to have a material influence on the behavior of buyers and sellers. In terms of appraisal, recent means that time period during which demand and supply conditions have remained relatively stable. When using the cost approach of appraisal, cost of the improvements is more commonly determined by utilizing current replacement cost. You are to appraise a single-family dwelling in an ordinary neighborhood. If supply and demand factors have remained relatively stable for the last 3 months, a good comparable property is a similar property that, after 2 months' exposure to the market, was sold 1 week ago. In the comparative approach of appraisal, one method of making final adjustments to price is to use a rating grid. In using a rating grid, it is most important that the subject property be the basis of comparison and all comparables be adjusted to it. An appraiser is using the market approach for an appraisal of a single-family house. By proper adjustment, the appraiser can use sale prices of all the following properties for comparison purposes, except houses recently sold between related parties. The appraisal of condominium units using the market comparison approach has some distinct differences from the appraisal of other types of real property. Which one of the following factors might be applicable to condominiums only? Common area charges. A 50-year-old house is arranged such that when the front door is opened fully, it is possible for a person standing on the porch to look straight down a hallway into the main bathroom. This is not an example of physical curable depreciation. In the comparative approach, it is most important that the subject building and the comparable buildings be similar with respect to factors judged important by buyers and sellers. Sophisticated investors will ultimately determine the value of undeveloped land by estimating the value of the land when improved and subtracting the costs of undertaking such a development. Functional depreciation can be defined as the loss in value caused by an outmoded or inadequate design. When using the cost approach of appraisal to estimate the value of a building that currently contains urea formaldehyde foam insulation, UFFI, insulation should be considered in your calculation as part of the overall replacement costs and a deduction for depreciation. In the comparative approach of appraisal, one method of making final adjustments to price is to use a rating grid. In using a rating grid, it is most important that the subject property be the basis of comparison and all comparables be adjusted to it. Which one of the following best describes curable functional depreciation? An outdated design that can be corrected easily. Where a single-family residence in Vancouver contains a wood-burning furnace as its primary heating system, this would be considered an element of functional curable depreciation. Which one of the following statements is false? If a comparable that has vendor financing at below-market rates is used in the comparative approach of appraisal, the value of the below-market financing will be added to the sale price of the comparable to determine the adjusted sale price. The cost approach of appraisal is only used on rare occasions to determine market value of residential properties. Which one of the following would be most correct as reasoning for the infrequency of use? The assumption that cost equals value is not necessarily correct. Reproduction cost is best defined as the current cost of constructing an exact replica of the subject property. The principle of substitution in the comparative approach of appraisal states that similar properties that have recently sold are comparable.